Salutations, my morbid maggots! Joker here and bah humbug! Both Sammy Boy and I made plans to go see our girls this Christmas, and can you believe it? Both of us had to cancel. His girl and her family got sick, and my Harley got lice from one of those snot-nosed siblings of hers. Oh, everything that could have gone wrong has gone wrong! Anyways, welcome back to the Morbid Vale. Today we've got a story of blood, death, sadism, and a pact with a spirit most foul. But first, if you haven't seen our previous build, Hofton Stormbringer, then click the pop-up now to view it. Now let's fall under the unholy spell of the Black Shaman. The Forsworn, the mighty and fierce group that ravages the Reach. These Breton tribesmen worship the ancient and wild spirits, most notably Hircine. But one child, born on the coldest night of the year in a village high in the Reach Mountains, was touched by darker spirits. She was born with eyes as black as night, with strange markings on her face. Naturally, the Forsworn had high expectations for her, believing that she may be the incarnation of an ancient hag-raven. But as the child grew, her true nature was revealed. Named Saya, the girl had no empathy nor love in her heart, save for the love of blood, pain, and carnage. It started with rats and birds, then progressed to larger prey like foxes. When she was 6, children from the village had gone missing. The only hint to their whereabouts was a single drop of blood on their pillows. When the children were eventually found in a crevice high up the mountain, all of the braves were horrified at the sight. The children had been mutilated, their bones bound with rope, their skins sewn together and draping around the grotesque visage before them. At the base of what could only be called a blasphemous altar, the intestines, hearts, stomachs, skulls, and lungs of their children laid in a neat pile. Many of the braves who had discovered the horrific sight fell ill, their stomachs knotted in terror and disgust. One of the elders who had come with them held up a torch to better inspect the blasphemous construct. Upon the crudely sewn-together skin of the children was a set of markings made with charcoal and blood, the same markings which adorned Saya's face. The braves and the 3 elders marched back to the village, and they rallied all their warriors together, lighting torches as they prepared to take Saya and her mother and burn them alive. But they had already fled. When the blasphemous construct had been found, a woman's voice called to Saya, telling her that she must flee. And so she woke her mother and told her what the voice had commanded. They had traveled far, finding a cave in the rift that they could call home. For the next 12 years, Saya kidnapped children of the Rift, experimenting on them with various poisons and cures, flaying them alive, stealing their souls, and even dining on their flesh. Then, on the eve of her 18th birthday, a Nord, out hunting, stumbled upon their cave. He saw the blood that stained the cave entrance and thought a bear might hide within. But when he found a fire and the bones of children littering the cave, he knew he had found something far worse. Sitting in a chair was an old woman with grey hair, and with his bow drawn the Nord approached. He demanded to know what had been done to the poor children. But the old woman said nothing. He crept closer, speaking in a louder voice as he circled around. But as he came to face her, all color fled from his face, and he loosed the arrow into the mummified corpse before him. "Mommy didn't like seeing what I did to them, so I helped her," a voice echoed from the cave. The Nord turned around frantically, trying to notch another arrow. "Then she didn't like hearing their screams, so I helped her again." The Nordman screamed out as he began firing arrows in all directions. "And then she said she didn't like the smell of their blood. Nothing was ever good enough for her. So finally, I took her heart. It was quite delicious." Those words still rang in the ears of the Nord as he turned around just in time to see Saya leaping on him, digging her thumbs into his eye sockets. He screamed out in pain, flailing around, unable to focus enough to grab hold of her. "No," she said, as she cocked her head to the side. "That doesn't sound right." She pressed her fingers deeper into his eyes, his screams growing louder. "There we go," she cooed. "That's the sound I was looking for." She licked the blood from her fingers and spat it out. "You taste revolting. No wonder Mommy said all Nords must die." 3 weeks later, a voice called to Saya in her sleep and told her to go to Windhelm to find a sorrowful child. But as she made her way through Darkwater Crossing, she got caught in an Imperial ambush. Not wanting anyone to prevent her from her duty, Saya pulled a scroll from her satchel and unleashed a firestorm all around her. From a distance, outside of the firestorm's reach, an Imperial hit her with an arrow coated in a paralyzing poison. 2 days later, she awoke on a cart, taking her to Helgen. But this was not the end. A dragon with wings as black as night attacked Helgen, inadvertently saving Saya's life. She escaped with Hadvar, and immediately after, she heard the voice again, this time directing her to Markarth, telling her that the child in Windhelm could wait a while longer. After escaping Helgen, the voice began directing Saya to various locations around Skyrim, guiding her and helping her become stronger and more formidable. One such location was the College of Winterhold, where Saya became very skilled in the art of conjuration, alteration, and alchemy. She failed at honing any destruction spell, and thus was forced to utilize scrolls for offensive magics. But scrolls weren't her only weapon. She began honing her stealth skills, allowing her to attack enemies from the shadow and prevent open confrontations. During her travels, she also became very well versed in the art of speechcraft, finding it fun to manipulate those who found her trustworthy. And now for the gear. Early on, Saya wore any robes that gave her buffs to magic or her health. Eventually, she traded these for a set of Dark Brotherhood of robes, despite her poor skill with destruction magic. She also wore vampire gloves and boots, which she added her own potent enchantments to via the use of alchemy. In addition to this, she wore the Warlock's Mark and the Ring of Namira. As for her weapons, Saya would dual-wield Mehrunes Razor and a bound sword. At a distance, she would use the Skull of Corruption and took great pleasure in stealing the dreams of sleeping people to fuel its dark power. And now for the gameplay. Saya preferred to lurk in the shadows, away from prying eyes. But when she was forced to interact with others, she did her best to befriend them, coaxing them into a sweet feeling of friendship and comfort. But once they outlived their usefulness, Saya would slit their throats and dine upon their warm flesh. When it came to combat, Saya preferred to stick to the shadows, skulking around until she had the opportunity to pick her enemies off one by one. Whenever she would be discovered, she would summon her Dremora lords to assist her while she retreated back into the shadows. However, if she could not disappear into the darkness, she would cast an armor spell, use one of her scrolls, and summon a bound weapon, and dual-wield it alongside Mehrunes' razor. Saya loved to experiment on her victims, and eventually devised 3 techniques which she favored above all others. Night terror is performed only at night. Saya would sneak up on the sleeping, steal their dreams, then use a potent paralysis poison against them. Afterwards, she would kill everyone, leaving only the paralyzed while she fed on the flesh of the dead. Once she had her fill of them, she would finally turn her attention to the paralyzed and kill them one cut at a time. Darkest Night is performed by Saya calling down a terrible storm, summoning abominations from oblivion, and sneaking through the battlefield to murder her enemies. Perhaps the most heinous of Saya's abilities is Playtime. Saya would use mind-altering poisons and scrolls against her enemies, forcing them to flee from and kill one another. After the effects wore off, she would use the power of the ritual stone and the ethereal crown to resurrect the dead and force everyone to fight their friends again. And now for the timeline. After fleeing Helgen, the voice guided Saya to Markarth, where she uncovered a secret cult of Namira, the Lady of Decay. This eventually led Saya to becoming the champion of Namira, and from there she was guided to Winterhold to hone her magical powers. Despite studying and trying to learn more, Saya was only able to master conjuration, alteration, and alchemy. But that power was more than enough to start. Soon after, she was led to Dawnstar, where the inhabitants were plagued by nightmares from Bermina herself. Once the Skull of Corruption was in her hands, the voice called to Saya again, this time telling her to make her way to Windhelm to find the boy it once spoke of. Once inside the city walls, Saya had no trouble in locating that boy. She found him with a skeleton, heart, flesh, and Nightshade laying in a circle of candles as he prayed to the Night Mother. She accepted the contract that he offered and went to Riften to kill the old woman named Grelod. After returning with news of the old hag's death and accepting the payment, Saya was guided to Whiterun. There she helped a funny man named Cicero, and soon learned of her dragonborn blood. Not long after that, she received a letter that simply said, "We know." The voice then directed Saya to a number of locations, where she discovered the words of power for Aura Whisper, Dismay, and Become Ethereal, along with several dragons, so she could use the shouts. Not long after this, the voice told her to find a place to rest, and when she awoke, she found herself in a strange shack, and a woman whom she did not know. After killing the 3 captives, Saya was offered a home with the Dark Brotherhood. It wasn't long after that, Cicero and the Night Mother arrived in the sanctuary, and Saya heard the voice once more, this time when hiding inside of the Night Mother's coffin.
"Oh, but I will speak. I will speak to you. For you are the one. Yes, you. You who shares my iron tomb.
It was then that Saya realized who her true mother was. She became the listener, and over the course of many weeks, she had become the leader of the Dark Brotherhood, built them to their former glory, and obtained Mehrunes' razor. Rumors of a shrouded figure who summoned and communed with Daedra began to spread, and soon all of Skyrim was calling this evil figure the Black Shaman. Saya gladly accepted the macabre title, favoring it over the title of listener. She obeyed the Night Mother, killing all manner of men and women who had contracts upon their heads. But her hunger for death was yet to be sated. Dragons, and even former allies, became her victims, leaving dozens of children, orphans, left to fend for themselves or go to the newly reformed Honor Hall Orphanage. Many had come to know the whispers of a fiend in the darkness that stole the lives of the innocent. But unbeknownst to them, the fiend was in the ear of all the Jarls of Skyrim. Through potions and alteration magics, Saya had manipulated many of the Jarls into not only renouncing the deaf and blind divines, but embracing Sithis as their sovereign. Ulfric, Balgruuf, and Skald were the only three who could not be swayed to serving Sithis, and so Saya used a different kind of magic to pull them closer to the Dreadfather. 18, and with a body even the Daedra would lust after, Saya seduced each one of the three Jarls. The first was Skald, the hard-headed Jarl of Dawnstar. He was advanced in years and had no heir to his throne, promising to not only give him a son, but that his own blood would sit upon the dragon throne. Saya had no trouble in seducing him. As for Jarl Balgruuf, who already had 3 children, Saya found it trickier to seduce him, but through much study, discovered how the death of his first wife hurt his soul. She broke into their crypt and found a hair of his wife. With it, Saya concocted a potion that would allow her to shapeshift into Balgruuf's wife, and at midnight she slipped past the guards and into Balgruuf's room. Convinced it was a wonderful dream, Balgruuf took her into his bed. Last but not least was Ulfric Stormcloak himself, a strong-willed man who desired the freedom of his people so they could worship Talos as they once did. Saya took him aside and told him the truth of who she was, that she was Dragonborn. She said she would help him overthrow the Empire, and that he would be greater than a meager High King. She told him of how much she admired him, and how together they would begin a dynasty of dragon emperors, mightier than those of old, and that Talos worship would be permitted throughout all of Tamriel under their reign. The words were sweet to the ear and to the heart, and Ulfric accepted her great offer. She then presented a ring to him, and said in a tender voice, "Say you'll be loyal to me, that you'll never forsake me." As Ulfric repeated the words, the ring on his finger bound him, just as it had Skald and Balgruuf. The mighty Jarls, subjected to lust and their own personal desires, became mindless thralls, enslaved by the enchanted rings on their fingers. The rings could never be removed, and if somehow severed from the body, would send their souls directly to Sithis. Saya controlled all of Skyrim's leaders, and quickly her ultimate plan began. She took all of the orphans and brought them to the Dark Brotherhood's sanctuary. There she trained them and molded them into the perfect killers. Within 3 decades, the Dark Brotherhood had become an army. Every man, woman, and child, from Skyrim to Blackmarsh, were members of the Dark Brotherhood, forsaking all of their gods and worshipping the Dreadfather and the Night Mother. Within a couple years, all of Tamriel had become a graveyard. Then they made their way to Akavir, and there they slew even more men, women, children, and beasts. Mortals, vampires, werebeasts, dragons, every living thing was gone, except for the army of darkness. They gathered together in the heart of Cyrodiil, and their sire gave them one final order. In an instant, all of them slit their own throats and bled out in moments. It had been done. Her destiny was fulfilled. Nothing lived anymore, except for her. Saya raised up her dagger and called out to the Dreadfather as she plunged the blade into her heart. In that moment, an earthquake unlike any other shook the very foundations of Nirn. Mountains fell, oceans dried up, the sun vanished, and Saya watched as the very maw of Sithis enveloped Nirn. A grim smile crept across her face as she took her final breath. When she awoke, she was cradled in the void. While all the beings from mortals to the gods suffered in dark anguish, Saya felt only the comforting cold embrace of the Dreadfather and Night Mother, and as it has been ever since. All of creation suffers in the emptiness of Sithis, while Saya sleeps, listening to their eternal torment, her sweet lullaby. We hope you enjoyed our latest and perhaps darkest build yet, Saya the Black Shaman. If you did, then please hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and whack that bell icon to be notified of our future videos. Have a great rest of your week, everybody, and Merry Christmas! Oh, ho, 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 ho.